What happens when you're met with zero tolerance? Here's a look at the new Hasbro Marvel Legends House of X, Marvel's Omega Sentinel. Harnessing the power of enhanced sensors, flight, and nanite regeneration, the Omega Sentinel dispatches enemies with ease. Before we get a closer look at Karima Shapander, the first thing we're going to want to do is figure out how tall Omega Sentinel stands. I'm going to take the tape measure right to the very top of her head. Just note, this isn't the head sculpt that comes with the figure when you get her out of the packaging. This was the other swappable option available. I did want to talk a little bit about this particular head sculpt. This is why I started the review with this one. But we're going to go ahead and take the tape measure right to the very top of her head, which is roughly around here. I'm going to stop it right there. According to the readout, Omega Sentinel stands 6.2 inches in height. We can immediately switch that to centimeters, revealing that the figure stands over 15.8 centimeters to be exact. Omega here marks the first figure in a series of reviews that we're going to be looking at as we build a rather impressive looking Tri-Sentinel. Really excited for that one. I've always been a big fan of Sentinels, so any new design of Sentinels that Hasbro can put out, that will be the wave that I'll be jumping on board. In the case here of the figure, she comes included with, of course, the much needed torso piece. It always seems to be the case whenever we look at these wave figures. I always start my reviews, if you've already noticed it, with looking at the figure that comes included with the torso. My crazy logic behind that is that I feel like every figure we look at after that initial figure, then I can then take the pieces and I can be putting them in the figure. And we can kind of follow along. You can join me on this journey as we build the figure from start to finish. Living up certainly to its namesake, though, the Tri-Sentinel has 3 ported holes along the top area, right here in its neck. Of course, because it's going to have 3 heads, Tri-Sentinel. As it goes for certainly looking at simply just this, it's not really much to look at. Kind of in a way reminds me of the robot from the remake of Lost in Space, the movie, of course, that starred Matt LeBlanc. From the back, it kind of looks like one of those Bob robots from Reboot, obviously just done here in purple. I will say, though, like looking at the plastic here, due to the marbling that they've used for this plastic, or the marbling as a result of the plastic that they use, I have like this crack. It's not a crack necessarily to the point where it's structurally a damage, but you can definitely see like there's a line, a fault line running through the plastic here in the purple. One thing I noticed also about the Tri-Sentinel, and this is just a weird off tangent to talk about, is that the design, the sleek design of the Tri-Sentinel reminds me of Transformers Prime Starscream. Just, I don't know why, just because of the triangular torso and really lanky looking limbs. But it's a starting point. Not really much to say much other than that. But of course, as we look at the rest of the figures, we're going to be putting in all those extra torso and all those extra limb pieces. We'll move that to the side for the time being. Now here, when it comes to Omega Sentinel, she comes included with 2 swappable heads, and of course she comes with the arm cannons. We'll talk a little bit about the added accessories in a second. I did, however, start this review deliberately using this particular head sculpt instead of the one that defaults out of the packaging, which is the smaller head sculpt right down there. The reason why I wanted to start with this particular head sculpt is because this is something that many fans have had concern with when it came to this particular figure. Go ahead and pick it up right now and have a closer look at the head sculpt. Now, when it certainly comes to Karima Shapander, again, apologies in advance for mispronouncing the name. Generally, when you think of this character in the comics, most fans tend to think of her with slightly darker black hair, and certainly not the faceplate that's covering over the majority of her face. Now, when it came to certainly them releasing the Omega Sentinel, they went this route, and it has made appearances in comics, though again, I feel like the hair would have been a lot darker than this, not the brown that they went with instead. But I think if most people are going to be thinking of Karima, I think generally they're going to be wanting to think of the character that has the regular human face and the darker black hair. Certainly a workaround to that for the time being is I have a Marvel Legends Psylocke, which I feel would be close enough proximity to maybe popping this head sculpt off and replacing it maybe with that Psylocke head sculpt, because I feel like that would give us a little bit more closer proximity to how she appears mostly in comics, the majority of the comic appearances. I won't necessarily find fault with the figure's head sculpt from a sculpt level. I think the head sculpt is actually really quite good. I like the hair, the way that it has that flow. It doesn't have a lot of additional color, mind you. It's just the coloring of the brown plastic. I do think it's got some really nice rich coloring to it. The dark gunmetal gray, of course the majority of her face, with those real bright ruby red eyes and ruby red lips. The paint on my figure, at least, is generally quite clean. I've seen some of images online where the paint on the lips is a little on the messier side, but I don't have that problem on mine. Again, I don't dislike this head sculpt. I want to make that very clear. But I just feel like if you're going to be giving us a character of the Omega Sentinel, give us the one that most people would recognize. Again, the more darker black hair and the more human-looking face. She does come with, like I said, a swappable option available. Try my best not to drop it. She comes with this one as well, which again, most people are also familiar seeing her in the comics. I don't know in the red case necessarily. I think her face is generally a little bit lighter than this. But if you want to go ahead and swap the head sculpt off, go ahead and just grab the noggin, wiggle it off the ball joint. Very easy to remove head. Actually, both of the heads are quite easy to remove. You can see a very large ball joint left behind. Now go ahead and pop the head in place. If you ever have this issue where you're trying to put a head down and then this joint just flops back and forth, I find one thing that helps is bring the peg joint as far back as you can get it, because after all, the ball joint can't go any further than that. And then just put pressure against it. Push it down as you're wiggling it in place. I find that's one good way of keeping the ball joint from flopping around on you, and then from there you can just push it down all the way. Pushing down the alternate head sculpt, bringing in the one that we looked at before to show you the difference between the two. Like, she has had various looks in the comics. Some would pinpoint this one as being their more favorite of the two looks. Again, there's also this head sculpt here, and there's, again, the one that's left on the table with a prettier, just regular human face. Anyways, putting that to the side. One critique I would certainly make when it comes to swapping out the head, and you don't see it as much when you have the regular, longer, well, not the regular, but the longer hair head sculpt, is I've noticed she has a really long neck. You see it even more so here when you swap it out to the bald head. You really notice that there is quite a long neck. Now, you could say because she's augmented, yeah, it would make some sense. Even in many images I saw online, she does have long necks in the comics, but I don't think to this extent. I mean, it's a pretty looking head sculpt, I will say. That real bright red, of course, marked with the white on the sides. And of course, she has the additional white along the back here. Really like the richness of the panel lining on this one, especially when it comes to the eyes as well. Between the eyebrows and the panel lining around the eyes, they really do pop against the backdrop of this, what I could almost even describe as a cherry taffy color. Yes, of course, I've always got to incorporate food colors. Generally, I would say across the board, one of the things that I would praise this figure for being is really rich, colorful, and clean. I mean, if you look at the coloring on it, short of a few little areas, like the black here, unfortunately, it's found its way to the side of the torso. The paint on this is really clean and rich. White would be always a problematic thing to deal with, because white shows flaws quite easily. But if you look at the panel lining on the legs, for example, the red on the sides of the leg, and even on the back, the paint is generally really clean on this figure. In addition to that, I really like the sculpting that they did to the augmented arms here. Again, you've got the little caps there on the side, all painted and accented in red. The same thing also for the arms as well. Now, she does have some swappable options available for the arms as well, the arm department. She comes with a couple of cannon arms. They seem to be able to be swappable on both sides, so nothing really necessarily is dictating that you have to have it on this one side, but all you have to really do is just pop the arms out, just like that on the one side. Yeah, you guessed it as well. Well, you know what? Before I go ahead and remove the other one, you have a little bit of customization available, really, because what you could do, pop the arm in there, for example, you really could just change one arm if you want to. Okay, I know you want to see both arms. I'm going to go ahead and pop the other arm off. There we go. And replace it with this arm right here. And again, if you want to switch that around, you can easily do that. The pegs are exactly the same. The peg holes are exactly the same. And again, you just pop those right in, like that. I prefer probably to go the route of having this on this side myself. I think, again, most images I've seen usually has this arm on this side or this cannon on this side. So after all it was said and done, let's go ahead and just pop that back into place. There we go. And there we go. But I do like the idea that you can swap these out. And what you swap them out instead of just the regular bionic arms, are these really massive looking cannons. These look super cool. I like this one because it has the additional orange that's been added in there. Both of them still have a continued coloring to the arm, so it doesn't look like it has a regular color of plastic, well, this color of plastic, and then abruptly it changes to something else. Because they just molded this as opposed to painting it, it means that the plastic color stays consistent from the top of the shoulder all the way to the bottom of the cannon. The only thing I would say is, I mean, this figure really could have benefited from additional washing just added in here. Marvel Legends don't tend to do a lot of additional washes, but I feel like if they had added just a little bit of a black wash to this, some of those real features, those strong features, there you go, would really pop on this. I could probably easily just do that myself as well, but just again, a little talking point, something I want to critique on this particular figure. I also probably would have colored in on the inside of the cannon, on this side, just because it looks so unfinished on the end of it. The hardest part for me, really, when it comes to a figure like this, or any figure that comes with swappable options like heads and arms, is really then deciding for yourself how you want to display the figure. I mean, there are really valid merits, I feel, to this particular head sculpt. Even though it's not more the consistent, it's not the general consistent opinion, I feel, that this is the head sculpt that many people would consider is Karima Shapander, but I still feel like that's a good-looking head sculpt. Again, it's just a matter of your preference as to which one you'd want to go with instead. Let's go ahead and run through the articulation here on Omega Sentinel. So her head rotates all the way around. It hinges down. It hinges up. And you can get quite a high reach on that as well. Doesn't rock back and forth just due to the nature of it being a ball joint. She has an upper torso ball joint as well, so you can rotate that all the way around. Shoulders hinge out. And nothing I really talked about earlier, but at least the way they designed the shoulder plates, these pieces right here, is when you are moving the arms up, because they're softer plastic and they were attached further down on the arm, it means that the arms can still look up or hinge up at a very comfortable 90-degree angle bend. In addition to that, you can rotate the arms all the way around. And again, this is far enough away that it doesn't get in the way of things. You can bend at the elbow. You can also rotate the arms. Even if you just use the regular robotic arms or you want to use the cannon arms, they work the exact same way. This one's a little stubborn on this side. I'm going to see if I can heat that up a little bit. I can still bend it, but I feel like I have to fight it every single time I want to bend that arm. As for the legs split out. Not a full splits, mind you. That's about it. That's about to the extent of what you can get it. Forward and back on the legs. She has a swivel 3/4 of the way up the thigh, a double hinge on the knee. And I want to talk a little bit about her feet for a second. Let's talk a lot about Omega Sentinel's feet. When it comes down to the feet, which I didn't really spend a whole lot of time about, still you've got that nice black panel lining, but I feel like the feet are stubborn. Yeah, they have the traditional hinges back and forth. They have an ankle rocker, but I don't feel like they really stay in place. It's hard to really describe. If you're bending the feet back and forth this way, or you're bending back and forth this way, I feel like there's resistance the whole time around. Also, when it comes to certainly displaying the figure, I've been out of the Marvel Legends loop for a bit, but I feel like they've changed the peg holes on the undersides of the feet. Not only have they changed the shape of them, but I think they've also changed the depth of them as well. I feel like the pegs would have been a lot deeper than this. And I don't know if necessarily that's Hasbro's deliberate strategy, that they've made and designed the peg holes on the undersides of the feet at such a depth that you can't use a regular traditional display stand. I mean, if you're not going to include pegs with these figures, at least make the heels deep enough, those holes in the bottoms of the heels deep enough, so you can actually use another display stand. Because she does have some difficulty standing, more so just for the fact that she's got really tiny feet. That's the culprit more than anything else. She stands perfectly fine like this, mind you, if you want to have her just standing straight in a museum pose. But if you want to be somewhat creative and get her in a more dynamic pose than that, then yeah, the idea of being able to use a display stand would come in handy. And you can't just use a regular run-of-the-mill display stand with Omega here, because she just doesn't have the depth enough in her heels to actually support another display stand. Gotta think it's difficult to be a toy company and come up with a definitive look for a figure and at the same time appease to all the fans. Because of course Karima is a good example of that. She's changed so much in the comics depending on who was drawing her at the time. Each artist likes to go in and draw a character like with their own style. Because of that, she's changed just from that alone. But she's also changed because she's always evolving, trying to become a little bit more human. So I think in the case here of Hasbro's Omega Sentinel, they, to their credit, gave us two different head sculpts, and I appreciate that. It probably isn't the head sculpt that most people recognize for Karima. I feel like probably most people, maybe even including myself, would have preferred her having the longer black hair and just a regular human face. I mean, again, I could work around that, just find myself that Psylocke that I don't currently have on display, take that head sculpt off, and if providing it uses the same size ball joint, which I haven't even checked yet, maybe I could just pop that out for the time being and get something what I feel will be closer look to the way that she looks in the comics. Again, I appreciate the fact that they give us 2 different head sculpts, but I feel like maybe with this head sculpt, the other one that they should have included with the longer black hair, instead of the one we ultimately did get. I like that head sculpt. I just think as a figure, it looks great, but it may not be the head sculpt that people most recognize the most when they think of Omega Sentinel. Great looking figure, great looking paint, and I do appreciate the fact that she does have swappable heads, 2 swappable arms, and 2 different ways that you can display the figure for yourself. Now, again, let me know down below in the comment section what you guys think of Marvel's Omega Sentinel, and do you like the choices that Hasbro ultimately went with the head sculpts that they chose for this particular figure? I always like reading your comments down below. If you guys are also new to this channel and enjoying all the content you're seeing, and enjoying the fact that we're now going back and doing Marvel Legends more on a regular basis, hooray for that! Make sure you hit that like button down below. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you are, of course, new to this channel. And, of course, make sure you're coming back to this channel Monday to Friday, 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is just really the first figure that we're going to be having a look at. We've got really a long way to go. There's a total of 6 figures, and then 7 technically if you count Wolverine that comes along for the ride. So there's going to be a lot of videos coming your way as we build ourselves a pretty cool looking Tri-Sentinel. So hopefully you guys will be there for that. And as always, guys, thanks for watching as you always do. I'll see you guys next time.